We hear so little of Vice President Kamala Harris, yet today quite a big foreign policy intervention where she stands up and says very publicly she wants an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And Downing Street then says that there is no difference between the UK and the US positions on Gaza. Indeed, and I quote, "We are entirely aligned." So what's going on here? Well, two things in my opinion. The first is that Kamala Harris is stepping up because it's becoming more and more obvious to everybody that Biden mentally isn't up to the job. The gaffes become worse. The signs of senility are there for all to see. And there is a feeling that maybe he'll get dumped before the August Democrat convention. And maybe she fancies her chances of being the front runner for the Democrat Party. So I see a political element to what she's doing today. But the other thing that's happening here, folks, is Israel is rapidly running out of friends. And we were pretty staunch supporters of Israel in the early part of the war. But David Cameron has very, very rapidly, it seems to me, shifted and changed that policy. Israel, I think, now very, very much on her own. I'm joined down the line by Jacob Olidort, Director of Research at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, and a man who formerly worked for Vice President Pence. Jacob, good evening, welcome to the programme. On my first point, we hear nothing, say on this side of the pond and not much more on your side of the pond. This did strike me as Kamala Harris getting political, perhaps with a little hint of ambition.
Well, good evening, Nigel, and thank you so much for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to be with you and your viewers. You're right. I mean, we haven't heard much from the vice president. On Sunday, she opened her speech in Alabama, talking about Gaza, talking about the humanitarian situation there. The full part of her quote is that, Hamas claims that it's for a ceasefire and yet doesn't stand behind that. And let's be real here. I mean, Hamas is at fault for the civilian suffering in Gaza today. Israel has been providing, record numbers of humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Just yesterday, 227 trucks, a convoy, the largest any single day, has been reported to have entered into Gaza. But the framework for a ceasefire has been presented. Israel has agreed to it in principle. Hamas is now, kind of delaying, doing all these stall tactics for why they don't want to do it. And so it's clear that everything falls on them from beginning to end of this.
Yeah, and of course, the Israelis are demanding to know how many of the hostages are still alive, and answer, there comes none. But my bigger point here, and this probably, Jacob, is the one that will alarm you, is I really do feel that Israel is running out of friends, that the tide of public opinion, and, you can call it propaganda, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but the tide of public opinion in the West is that Israel has overreacted to what has happened. She really is becoming very isolated, isn't she?
Well, I mean, you pointed out at the beginning of your segment that, the United Kingdom, the United States have been remarkable in their rhetoric and actions in support of Israel. That remains, despite rhetoric here and there. But you're right. I mean, Israel faces international scrutiny about this. The fact is the framing is completely off. I mean, of course, one civilian casualty that's unmerited is one too many. But Israel has gone above and beyond any military in history to avert those civilian casualties. And so that focus by the likes of the EU foreign policy chief and others in the United Nations is completely out of place. But it shows really the lack of context here and really the need for international coordination.
Israel may well have tried incredibly hard, just to take out the bad guys of Hamas. But of course, there were always going to be civilian casualties. Jacob, great to have you on. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
I suspect a difficult few weeks and months ahead.